All right, friends, if you're here for a video about a flawless office setup loaded with all the right expensive gear, perfect lighting, and well-crafted feng shui, you're in the wrong place. I'm here to break down my shared office space where I have compartmentalized a ton of machines, tools, and workstations that allow me to create the products and the prototypes that I like to test and design here. But more importantly, I still wanted to maintain a space that I could share with my family and not disrupt our daily lives. So without waiting any further, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. First things first, I wanted to thank my friends over at flexispot for sponsoring today's video and sending me their flexispot E6 standing desk to try out. And I must say, I've been very impressed with it right out the gate. Some of the problems I've had with previous sit-stand desks are lower build quality, loud noises coming from the motors, not very intuitive interfaces to program it, and the biggest one would be split pieces of wood so that you couldn't have a really long desktop without breaking up into multiple pieces that was never perfectly even. So the E6 is great. It's one solid bench top that's 1 inch thick, very sturdy, high quality, doesn't scratch, no nicks, shipped here perfectly. And it also has a super intuitive programming interface so I can set my different heights, whether I'm sitting, standing, and I have additional slots if I had somebody else using this same space. And the other piece is the hardware and build quality is just fantastic. It took me maybe 20 minutes to put the thing together once it showed up at my door, and I have not had any issues since using it. Something else that is really cool that I have not seen on other standing desks is their anti-collision setting that you can tune the sensitivity for. So if you're like me, I park my chair underneath, and if the desk runs into it, it will sense it and automatically retract. I love the safety feature. It's great because I have kids and other things that I want to take care of. So if you're interested in learning more about flexispot's products, please check out the link that I have in the description below. Really quickly, I just wanted to give a rundown of my general philosophy and sort of requirements that I came up with for the space that I didn't really just write down one day and kind of work to. They've just developed and evolved over time. So the first thing, I wanted everything that I'm ever gonna need for a lot of the work that I do within a couple feet as much as possible. Number two, I wanted to be able to reduce clutter, blend in with the storage solutions that I come up with, and make it so that they blend in but still allow for easy access to the things that I need. Number three, all of this stuff has to be multi-purpose. What do I mean by that? I'm not the only person that's down here in this space, so I wanted to have some room for things that we need for the kids, things that we need for my wife, and overall just something that can also sort of change and evolve over time so that we're meeting the needs of everybody in the same area and it's not all about me. And then the fourth really big one, as many of you might know, if you don't, I'm huge on 3D printing. I've been 3D printing for nearly a decade now, and I have been searching and searching for the right enclosure system for my machines, my filament, a lot of the tools, a lot of the supporting materials that I use, and I needed something that could consolidate all of that into one big area that's easy to get to, along with keeping the machines quiet so that it doesn't bother other people in the same area and being easy to set up and maintain. So with my basic Desirements out of the way, I kind of wanted to talk through the three main areas that I work in when I'm inside of this shared space. The first, and probably the most important nowadays in my mind, is my desk. Love being at my desk. I block out at least an hour a day to be down here working, whether I'm shooting videos and trying to edit, or I'm doing CAD modeling, or I'm doing research on different products or different materials that I want to experiment with. This is where 90% of the really hard, like deep work happens. And so it's really important for me to have this area dialed. Personally, this is why I really like having a standing desk. When I migrated to my first standing desk, it was a life changer for me because, you know, not only am I sometimes sitting down doing really deep think work at the computer, but sometimes I like to have it raised so that I can be bouncing back and forth from my two bench tops, tweaking designs on one, over on the other, you know, putting some fasteners together, or maybe hooking up to a computer to run some like circuit testing or some code testing. The ability to have the desk move up and down, to me, actually is much more than the ergonomics. It's more about practicality. I like bouncing from one side of my room to the other and just working on stuff as I go. So at the moment, I really like the way it's set up. It's really basic, and I kind of did that intentionally. I don't like a lot of clutter where I'm working at. So it's the monitor, it's the computer, it's the headphones, it's the mouse, it's the keyboard. I'm really not trying to go over the top here, but outside of that, really basic spot, big emphasis on just keeping it clean and crisp and opening up a lot of space for me to be able to do a lot of like drawing and doodling, and then jumping straight to my keyboard to be able to input a lot of the work I'm sort of flushing out as I sit here and come up with stuff. Okay, the next one I want to talk through is this big old honking storage cabinet behind me. This might not make a lot of sense if you haven't seen some of my other videos. You might be wondering like, what is this big huge mess back here? This is where all the magic happens with with my 3D printing. So as you can tell, I have two printers. I have the Bamboo Labs P1S and I have the Bamboo Labs P1P. The P1S actually used to be a P1P and I did the upgrade kit, which I'll put a link below if anyone's interested in that. This has become such a cool piece of my space. I love it. There's so much storage in here. I'm gonna say this right out the gate. I cannot find this product anywhere else, so I'm sorry I'm not able to pass that on to viewers, but maybe this is something to help with like ideas. This is meant as like a kid's storage closet area, and it just works perfectly for the 3D printers, and I can still mount spools of filament on the side if I don't have the AMS. And then the other cool piece about it is the drawers right here. They are perfect for putting filament inside of. So I got filament stored over here. I've got some overhead storage for a lot of the packing and shipping that I do when I make products and sell them. And then down below is just like overflow storage for activated charcoal filters if I'm doing really stinky prints. Overall, this whole system has been great. I love it. I wish it was still available, and I'm sorry that it's not, but maybe use this as a template for like, okay, you know, closet storage accessories out there that are pre-built that you can just toss into a space, and they might have perfect dimensions like these do where you can just toss your printer in there. Because the nicest thing is that when I am running prints and say the family's down here and we're wanting to, you know, watch TV or watch a movie together, I can have prints running in there and I can have the door closed and it doesn't make a ton of noise, which is really, really great. All right, the third step, the last piece of this puzzle is this workstation over here. These are just Alex drawers you can buy from IKEA. I have two of them. And then for the top, I just bought a bench top that you can just lay over the top and secure to the wall, secure to the shelf so it doesn't tip over. It might be a really good option for people that want a permanent standing desk, quote unquote. Mind you, I'm 6'3", so the height of this is perfect for me. Probably not gonna be great for some other folks. So maybe if you do like a tall telescoping chair here or something, that's another good solution. As you can see, we store the weights underneath it because my wife likes to do a lot of her workouts down here in front of the TV. Also on top, it's kind of doubling as a bookshelf right now as well for a lot of books and things that I like to have on hand that are quick reference or things that I like to just hit the couch with and read if I have a moment of spare time. And you'll notice too, right above it, we have a TV mounted and it has the telescoping bracket on the back. So what's nice is when the kids want to have somewhere else to hang out and we're up in the upper living room area, we can have, you know, kids and friends down here watching their own shows. This has become a really nice little feature of this room because it enables that blended kind of space that I was talking about. But most importantly with having these drawers over here is I have converted every single drawer to house a lot of the tools and equipment that I use on a very frequent basis. And I have not gone overboard with doing a lot of the storage inside of them yet. I am considering getting into the Gridfinity scene because I'm starting to find that I need to get a little bit more specific now that I have sort of ebbed and flowed down to the tools that I use on a very regular basis. I did find some of these little gray bins in there that you can buy on Amazon. They're really cheap and they end up fitting perfectly if you go 3 units wide inside or 1 unit all the way across, which was perfect and honestly saved me all of that time that would go into doing the Gridfinity system. I still think I'm gonna try to do that for a lot of the drawers. I wanted to say this too, because this is like a workspace video, like fun kind of, you know, here's how my workshop is set up. You don't have to buy new tools. I'm just gonna be that guy. I'm gonna say that out loud. You don't need to be out buying like super high dollar tools if you're into tinkering. A lot of the stuff that you may see popping up in this video inside of my tool drawers, I got for free, whether that was from a relative cleaning out a shop or I was just at someone's house and I saw a tool and I was like, that's really cool. And sometimes people are like, well, just take it because I never use it. For example, my micro screwdrivers that sit in there are from an old toolbox I found at my mom's ranch. Regardless, do yourself a favor and go out and, you know, go to Goodwill, go to pawn shops, go to, you know, go find places where you can find cheap tools. Most tools will last you a really long time. Don't knock on Harbor Freight. It's great, especially for tinkering tools because you're not putting a lot of high torque or a lot of high stress into the tools that you're working with. And you can come out with some stuff that works perfect for you and enables you to do a lot more because you're not getting sucked into the scene of like overly expensive stuff. Don't get me wrong. I think there's some awesome tools out there. Maybe one day when I've got some extra change in my pocket, that's kind of where I'm gonna allocate resources. But for now, the goal is just making stuff. So when it comes to storing and tools and all this conversation, just keep in mind, you can be pretty sneaky about how you acquire tools that enable you to do projects. And then, you know, I'm just gonna throw in a couple bonus items. I've got the 3D printed rocket and the 3D printed Raptor engine because 3D printing is really the core of what I think of on a daily basis. I wanted to find some items that I could 3D print that kind of accentuate the room, speak a little bit more to my character, but I didn't want to pay a ton of money to go out and get, you know, either models that someone else pre-populated or have to pay for kits that didn't feel as fulfilling to me to build. So this is what I found and they're great. I'll have some links to them in the description if you want to go find these models yourselves, but great prints, fun projects. And I've mentioned it before, the rocket was a really fun thing for my son and I to print and build together. And there's tons of stuff like that out there on the internet. So keep an eye out. All right, I just want to throw out some ground rules and maybe some takeaways here from sort of walking through my workspace and how I have it set up, just to kind of squash any weird feelings that can kind of be generated by looking at other people's workspaces and like playing the comparison game a little bit. I was worried about that with this video because I just wanted, I really like to talk about, hey, here's how I'm doing things, because I want the feedback. You know, I want comments from other people to be like, hey, have you considered this? Or have you thought about upgrading this piece in here? Because I think a lot of really good work happens from a community, not always in a vacuum, rarely in a vacuum actually, if I wanted to emphasize that. So these are some of the things I wanted to spike out to be really specific about in my intentions with this video. First thing, I didn't plan this space out. This has just evolved over time and I really like where I've kind of ended up at, and it's gonna keep growing. I've been in this house for 3 years now, and this is kind of where it's sort of found its sweet spot. So yeah, sometimes you just adapt to a space over time, and I think that's really cool to see. Adam Savage is a really good example of this. He's always coming up with zonky videos about, you know, little storage systems or benches or tools or things that he transforms to make his workflow better. But obviously you can't just replicate that immediately because you don't have the same space, tools, workflow, anything. Like a lot of your requirements can be different. So take that with a grain of salt. Overall, my goal was just to kind of record this so that I can, again, start a conversation maybe, or more importantly, I can look back on this in the future and be like, oh yeah, there were things that I tweaked. Which brings me to point number 2. This video is just as much for me as it is for you. All of the content that I'm putting out is a project for me in and of itself. So this video and the way that I record, the way that I shoot B-roll, the way that I talk through a lot of the points, like this is a project I'm working on. This to me feels just as much like a bit of an engineering challenge as maybe some of the other things that I try to tackle on a daily basis. So for me, this really helps me flesh out the way that I'm working on this as a project, but also looking at other projects that I do too. I get a 2-for-1 special and maybe a 3-for-1 because again, I want to hear the feedback from others. So the way I'm setting this up, the way that I'm recording, the way that I'm talking about my space, nothing personal to you. It is for me though. Most important thing that I want to spit out there before we get to the outro of this video, where you live and what you do is different in some way. Is having a ton of storage necessary? Do you really need everything perfectly laid out before you can start making a lot of stuff? The answer, no. You need to be enabled to make stuff. How you do it and where you do it is unique to your life. Someone on YouTube cannot see that. Maybe you're in college and you have access to like a makerspace or a lab or, you know, some research area that's unique to you and it has all the tools and the things that you need. Maybe you're living with your parents or you live with your friends temporarily and you're sharing resources with them. The point is, there is no one size fits all for where you do your work. So overall, I just wanted this to be something to think about is, you know, don't get too caught up in making a space where all you're doing is focusing on, you know, having fancy tools, having the right gear, setting it up just perfectly. Those are problems that solve themselves over time. And I also want to say that because if you're hanging out on YouTube, you've probably been like me who stumbled across somebody else's like workshop setup, and it's a little defeating because you're like, oh my gosh, this person has everything perfect, like custom lights, there's paint that matches all the, you know, accents on the toolboxes and yada yada. It's not realistic. I'm just going to be the person to say that because again, I feel like the way you're going to get ahead with whatever you're trying to make or create is by playing an iterated game where the goal is just putting out that work on a daily basis and letting the background and your surroundings kind of solve themselves and just keep having that conversation with them over time. All right, thanks for sticking with me for this video. I hope that maybe some of the pseudo words of wisdom that I brought out about setting up your workspace, or maybe just some of the general ideas that I've put into my own workflow and my own workspace are helpful in some way to you, but vice versa. If you have some tips, you know, or tricks to think about for me, especially if there's things that can be enabled by 3D printing or just really cheap upgrades that would help out that you can think of, throw that stuff in the comment section below. I'd really love to hear the feedback, and go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you feel like this kind of content resonates, and I'll make sure to keep putting out more and more stuff like this in the future. Also, if you need something else to chew on for a little bit, maybe check out this video. It's got some thoughts around 3D printing that might be helpful for you, and it'll give you something to jump to next. But with that, thanks everyone. I appreciate you hanging out with me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.